If I had known that saying, "Oh yeah, I work with fragrances," would lead to this, I'd have bitten my tongue off right there in that coffee shop. Now I was trapped in his apartment, in his scent, and in the most ridiculous lie I'd ever told. New York in the fall always smells like roasted chestnuts, wet concrete, and a faint trace of desperation. I was used to it. What I wasn't used to was the way an alpha's pheromones could cut through it all like a silver blade, sharp, warm, and intoxicating in a way I could never admit out loud. His name was Ethan Hayes, CEO of Hayes & Company, one of the fastest-growing fragrance companies in the country. My name was Noah Reed, a broke Omega who shelved books for a living and smelled like second-hand vanilla candles from the clearance bin. We shouldn't have met. And yet, 3 weeks ago, fate threw me in his path, or more accurately, spilled my caramel latte all over his $1,000 suit. "You work in fragrance?" he had asked, his hazel eyes narrowing with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. I could have said no. I should have said no. But some devil in my brain decided that the best way to avoid humiliation was to lie through my teeth. "Yeah," I said. "I'm a consultant. High-end stuff. You probably wouldn't know my work." The smirk he gave me then should have been my first warning. 3 weeks later, I was standing in his loft in Soho, surrounded by shelves lined with crystal perfume bottles, pretending I could smell the difference between Amber No. 5 and Amber No. 7. "This one's yours," Ethan said, holding a sleek silver bottle toward me. "Tell me what you think." I froze. The thing was, Omegas are naturally sensitive to scent. But I wasn't some trained expert. I could tell if something smelled like cinnamon or gasoline. Sure, but the poetic nonsense perfume people say? No clue. I inhaled, and immediately my knees went a little weak. Ethan's scent was all over it. Alpha musk, rich and grounding, wrapped in notes of cedarwood and something I couldn't name, something that made my chest ache. I swallowed hard. "It's bold," I said slowly, trying to channel every perfume I'd ever overheard. Confident, but with a softness that lingers. Ethan tilted his head, studying me like he could see right through me. "Interesting. You picked up on the balance." He stepped closer. Too close. My back brushed against the edge of the counter, and suddenly I was aware of every inch of him. The warmth radiating from his body, the way his cologne, or maybe just him, settled over me like a weighted blanket. "Do you always get flustered when you talk about scent?" he asked. "No," I lied again. "Just appreciating craftsmanship." His lips twitched in amusement, but he didn't push. Instead, he moved past me, brushing his arm against mine in a way that felt accidental but definitely wasn't. The problem with pretending to be an expert is that experts get invited to things. Ethan had a gala coming up, an exclusive launch party for his company's new flagship fragrance, and apparently I was going as his guest. "I need your input," he'd said over the phone, his voice low and smooth like dark chocolate, "about the scent, and other things." Other things? My heart had no business skipping at that. When I arrived at the gala, I felt like a fraud wearing borrowed clothes and holding a borrowed confidence. The room glittered with chandeliers and people who probably bought islands for fun. Ethan was magnetic in a tailored black suit, his hand warm on the small of my back as he guided me through the crowd. "Smile," he murmured, his breath ghosting against my ear. "Everyone's watching." It wasn't until halfway through the night that I realized maybe they weren't watching us. Maybe they were watching him. And maybe I wasn't just a convenient plus one. Later, on the balcony, the city stretching out beneath us, he offered me another scent sample. I took it, pretending to analyze. "You know," he said, leaning on the railing beside me, "most people try to impress me by quoting the latest trends, but you actually seem to feel the scent. Like it's personal." I almost laughed. If only he knew the truth, that the only thing I was feeling was him. His presence. His alpha pull. "Maybe," I said softly, "it is personal." The way he looked at me then, like he was trying to memorize my face, made my throat tighten. But before I could say anything else, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out onto the balcony. He was Beta. I could tell instantly his scent was clean, neutral, but laced with something sharp. "Hayes," the Beta said, "we need to talk. Now." Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced at me once before following the man inside. And just like that, the warmth between us vanished, replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. When he came back, he didn't smile. "We're leaving," he said, voice clipped. The ride back to his apartment was silent except for the hum of the city outside. I wanted to ask, but something in his expression warned me not to. Inside, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "You're not what I expected," he said finally, his tone unreadable. I tried to joke. "What did you expect? Some snobby French guy who talks about top notes and bass notes?" Ethan didn't laugh. "I expected someone who wouldn't get under my skin." My breath caught. "And is that a bad thing?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, closing the space between us in 2 long strides. His hand came up, fingers brushing my jaw. "Tell me, Noah," he murmured. "Do you even know what my scent does to you?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was I knew exactly what it did. That was the night everything shifted. I was still lying about being a fragrance expert, but I was no longer sure if the lie was the most dangerous thing between us. Because somewhere between his teasing smirks and lingering touches, I'd started to wonder what would happen when he found out. And worse, what if by then, I didn't want to walk away? The days after the gala felt like walking on a wire. Ethan didn't pull away completely, but there was a weight in his silences now, an edge to his touch. I told myself it was my imagination, but every time his phone buzzed and he glanced at the screen with that same tight jaw, my stomach knotted. Finally, one rainy Friday, he asked me to meet him at the Hayes and Company headquarters. His voice on the phone was calm, too calm. When I arrived, he was in his office, standing by the window with his back to me. The city outside was a blur of silver rain. "Noah," he said without turning around, "how much of what you've told me is true?" I froze. My throat went dry. "What do you mean?" He turned then, his hazel eyes sharp but not cruel. "That man at the gala, he's a competitor. He told me something, that you don't work in fragrance, that you're a librarian who lives in Queens." The lie collapsed around me like wet paper. My voice cracked. "Ethan, I didn't mean to, I panicked when we met. I didn't want you to think I was beneath me," he finished quietly. I flinched. "No. I just didn't think you'd even talk to me otherwise." He leaned against the desk, studying me for a long moment. "So all this time you weren't analyzing the scent?" I shook my head, shame burning my cheeks. "No. I was just reacting to you. Your scent. I didn't have the words for it, but I felt it." For a moment, I thought he might laugh, or worse, tell me to leave. But instead, he walked toward me, slow and deliberate, until the air between us thickened. "My scent," he said softly, "isn't in the bottle. It's me. And you felt it anyway." His hand came up, brushing the damp hair from my forehead. "You think I've never been lied to before? You think I can't tell when someone's faking an opinion about bergamot?" A startled laugh escaped me despite myself. "So you knew?" "I suspected," he admitted. "But I kept you around because you looked at me like I wasn't just the CEO of a multimillion-dollar company. You looked at me like I was a person." My chest ached at his words. "You are. You're Ethan." He smiled then, small and real, and something in me unclenched. But before I could speak, he stepped even closer, his scent curling around me like a warm blanket. "Tell me one true thing," he murmured. I swallowed hard. "I think about kissing you every time you stand this close." His lips curved. "Then stop thinking." The kiss was slow at first, almost tentative, but it deepened quickly, all heat and breath and the heady rush of an alpha claiming space in my world. My hands found his shirt, clutching at the fabric like it could anchor me. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "No more lies," he whispered. "No more lies," I promised. Over the next few weeks, we settled into something that felt dangerously close to a relationship. Ethan still worked insane hours, and I still spent most of my days surrounded by books. But we made time late-night dinners in little hole-in-the-wall diners, lazy Sunday mornings in his loft with jazz playing in the background, the scent of coffee and his skin mingling in the air. I learned things about him he never told anyone else, about the pressure of running a family business, about his mother's obsession with perfection, about the fear that one day he'd lose himself to the corporate machine. And in return, I told him about the tiny used bookstore where I grew up, about the way reading became my refuge, about the loneliness of being an Omega in a city that often treated us like curiosities. Somewhere along the line, I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. It happened on a night that smelled like rain and grilled hot dogs from a street cart. Ethan had just flown back from a meeting in Chicago, and I'd met him outside his building. He looked exhausted, but when he saw me, his whole expression softened. "I missed you," he said simply. I grinned. "You saw me 2 days ago." "Too long," he murmured, kissing me before I could tease him further. Up in his apartment, we were halfway through takeout when he set his chopsticks down and gave me that look, the one that meant he was about to say something important. "I want you to design something for me," he said. I blinked. "Ethan, I've told you I'm not." "I know," he interrupted. "You're not a perfumer. But you know me better than most people do. I want you to work with my team to create something that feels like us." For a long moment, I just stared at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." His voice was steady, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "I don't care if it never sells a single bottle. I just want to have it. A scent that's ours." My throat tightened. "Okay," I said softly. "Let's do it." Took weeks of trial and error. I learned more about fragrance than I ever thought possible, how notes could layer like chapters in a story, how a scent could start sharp and end in a whisper. Ethan's team was patient, even amused by my unpolished opinions. And slowly, something began to take shape: warm amber and cedar for him, soft vanilla and rain for me, with a thread of something bright and unexpected running through it. The night we finished, Ethan held the final bottle in his hands like it was made of gold. He uncapped it, inhaled, and then sprayed it into the air between us. The scent bloomed familiar and new all at once. "It's us," he said, almost in awe. I stepped into his arms, breathing it in. "It's home," I whispered. Months later, the fragrance was never released to the public. But on quiet mornings, when sunlight spilled across his bed and he pulled me closer, I could smell it on his skin. And every time, it reminded me of the night I told my first and last lie to him and how it led me here. Because in the end, it wasn't about perfume at all. It was about finding someone whose scent and soul you could recognize anywhere. And Ethan Hayes? He was mine. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.